Okay, I wanted to make sure we had everybody. So we are going to get started with Katie Broderick with 451 Research, and I'll break the news a little bit here. We have a survey going with 451 Research. Katie will give you more details about that, but this is just part of Woody's positioning here because we are an industry authority. So we're going to be doing a lot of research with 451 to better understand what your issues are and whatnot. So without further ado, Katie Broderick with 451 Research.
I've got one. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. How are you all doing? It's great to be here at another great Woody Summit. This morning I wanted to talk a little bit about making tomorrow brighter and creating opportunities for women in science, technology, engineering, and math. And so how do we do that? How do we move forward? How do we create those opportunities for advancement, right? And so before stepping into that a little bit and relying on a lot of data that you all actually have provided over the last couple of years to us, which is wonderful, I wanted to talk a little bit about the advancer isn't working. Can you advance the slide? Okay. Technical difficulties, 1 second. There we go. I wanted to take a second and talk about the state of affairs. I think a lot of us live our daily lives, right? And we have anecdotes surrounding us about what's going on with women in technology in terms of roles and also technology-focused companies. It's nice to take a step back and have a little bit of a reality check of where are we and where are we headed. And so on the left side, you're going to see that women are definitely showing up, which is amazing. These are in the US, women are the majority of the workforce, and also women get the majority of bachelor's degrees today, which is excellent. However, once you look at things that are focused on science, technology, engineering, and math, it really drops off. And so when you look at things like computer science, engineering, and even roles-based, things like computer hardware engineers and security analysts, it's more like 1 in 5. So even though it's over 50% for the entire workforce and for all bachelor's degrees, it really drops off. And then on the right, you can see this is some of the things that you all have told us. And I think that some big themes popped up. One of them was about pipeline. And so all of us want to hire women who are qualified for positions, and we just aren't finding them, right? There just aren't enough women out there to reach parity and have it be 50-50 within science, technology, engineering, and math. They aren't out there. The other thing that we heard a lot of was a little bit of pessimism, I would say. We asked all of you, do you think that we're going to reach parity within 15 years, which is, I would say, a decent amount of time. And less than a third believe that we will be there within 15 years. And so just not a strong belief in us having a strong trajectory, right? Not a lot of growth there. And then lastly, and I think Woody has a big role to play here, was around community. And this is kind of one of the sadder statistics, I would say. Only 6% of respondents of all of you feel like there's a woman that you can relate to and look up to within a STEM role, which is just kind of not great. And I think that community makes you like your job more, frankly, right? Just having women around you that you know that you can talk to. But also it's a source of gaining those opportunities, right? If you aren't close with a lot of women that you're working with, it's hard to reach those opportunities. And so how do we make this better? How do we move forward and improve upon the current state of affairs, which frankly isn't so great? I think one thing that we need to do is reach out to women when they're making these decisions. And so we asked all of you, when did you decide to enter a STEM-focused role or a STEM-focused company? And it's actually pretty young. And so we're looking at women that are in college, graduate school, but even more so, K through 12, actually. And so I think that mentorship among colleagues and all of those things is excellent, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But don't forget that these decisions are being made at a really young age. And so getting involved in things like Big Sisters, getting involved in younger mentorship programs, helping to shake that curriculum to focus more on science, technology, engineering, math is really important, because these decisions do actually last a lifetime. It's weird to think of a kindergartner considering these things, but that seems to be the case. And so when we are interacting with those young women and girls, what are some of the things that we need to be focusing on? And what makes them feel like this is a field, this is something that I am interested in and that I want to pursue? And it turns out that, like everyone, women want to be in a field that they are good at, and they want to be in a field that they're interested in. We don't want to be bored, of course. And so in those interactions with young women and with girls, we want to be emphasizing that you're good at this. You can do this. You know, there are a lot of things around us that tell us this is not for us. We all know what those are, but we need to counteract that and talk about the fact that this is something that we're good at and that you can do really, really well. And I think the other thing is garnering interest. For better or for worse with kids, you got to make it cool, right? And so I remember being at science camp in 7th grade doing things like an egg drop. I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with that, right? So it's this idea that you put a chicken egg inside of some sort of container, like a styrofoam cup or something like that, and drop it from a certain height, and you win if your egg doesn't break. And so the idea is you need to absorb the impact from gravity and all those things. But it's just a fun way of gaining interest and getting people excited about science, technology, engineering, and math for sure. And so when we're interacting with these women, one thing that we found in the data, this is really interesting, is that if a woman chooses to enter a STEM field or kind of gain interest there, it is correlated with higher satisfaction in their career later in life. And so the earlier that we can catch people and kind of get them excited about STEM, it has impact throughout the rest of their life. And so this is showing respondents that are highly satisfied with their career by when they chose to enter the field. And so you can see that if they chose to enter in grade school, about 68% of those people are really happy with their career. And as you go on, if you chose to enter STEM as a job right out of school, for example, it's a little bit lower. And so it's funny how the pipeline problem is actually tied to retention, right? So if we get people earlier, we're more likely to retain them, which is pretty interesting. Another thing that has a lasting impact, and I think we can all speak to this at a personal level, on happiness with your career is just culture at home. And so we asked all of you, were you raised thinking that women should work at home? Like, that's definitely work. I have a 4-month-old at home. That is definitely work. Or if you should work outside the home, or if you should have the choice, right? Work outside the home or work at home. And so of respondents that were raised thinking that women should work outside the home, or they were raised thinking that women should have the choice to work outside the home or work at home, those respondents are much more likely to be engaged with their career, to be satisfied with their career, and also likely to recommend a career in STEM to their colleagues and friends. And so there's not a whole lot that we can do here. It's a very personal thing, but we do see in the data a generational kind of trend here. And so older respondents were more likely to be raised, of course, thinking that women should stay at home, and younger that they either have the choice or that they should work outside the home. And so that's kind of a wave and a trend that we can continue to count on, which is exciting. We talked a lot about mentorship this morning. I think the app and many other tools are out there to get people connected with mentors. And we asked all of you, have you served as a mentor? Have you received mentorship in your career? This is focused on professional mentorship. And what we found was really encouraging. The majority are both receiving mentorship and giving mentorship, which is excellent, right? We asked all of you, on the left, you're gonna see serving as a mentor. And so what's the gender kind of makeup there? And the majority have served as a mentor for both men and women, which makes sense. Of those that have mentored only one gender, it was predominantly female. And so what that means is all of us in the room, we're most likely to mentor men and women, but if we have to choose, more likely to kind of side towards the women, which makes sense. In terms of receiving mentorship, it's actually the opposite, which is interesting. So again, both is the most predominant answer, but in terms of receiving mentorship, it's men that we're likely to receive mentorship from, which I believe is just a supply and demand sort of issue, right? 1 in 5 in the field are women, and so if you're going to receive mentorship, 80% of the people are available are men. And I think this is a concrete way that men can definitely help out with this, right? There are lots of things that can be done by both genders, but one thing out there is, like I said, 80% of the people in the field, roughly, depending on where you are male. And so one thing that you can do to help out is mentoring women, because it's helpful, and I'm going to show you how right now. Women that have received professional mentorship are much more likely to be satisfied with their career and much more likely to recommend a STEM career. And so this, again, like the culture that you're raised with, like when you decide to enter the STEM fields, mentorship has a lasting impact. And I think something to consider here is that this is not people who are currently receiving mentorship. It's if they ever have. And so this is a really long trend that we're seeing. And even if you mentor someone and then you fall out of touch for some reason, you still had a lasting impact on them, odds are, right? Mentorship doesn't have to last forever. You can kind of switch and change as things evolve. But it is important to do, no matter for how long you can do it. There are some other helpful and hurtful factors that you all told us about in your careers. Let's start off with the helpful ones, start on a positive note. It turns out that management plays a big role here. 75% of respondents, 3 out of 4, said that their manager had a helpful impact on their career. Second here is reading books and articles, interestingly. So this is just staying up to date on what's going on in tech, definitely. And then professional groups, things like Witty, right? Networking, getting to know our colleagues, and building that community that very few people feel like they have. On the hurtful side of things, this is getting into the opportunity issue that I talked about earlier. A lot of women feel like they just have a lack of opportunity. And that's something that we're going to be drilling into in this year's study. Is there a lack of opportunity because we aren't asking for those opportunities? Is it because they're unfairly being given to other people? Is it because they aren't being given to us? And I'm sure it's a mix, right, of all of the above. But let's figure out what that is and how we can overcome this real or perceived lack of opportunity and what's going on there, because we feel like it's hurting us in our careers. So this is important. The next one is lack of salary knowledge, which there's a lot of legislation going on about that right now, pretty interesting topic. And then gender discrimination is still up there, unfortunately, continues to be an issue for sure. And so in terms of opportunity, again, another spot that it shows up, we did a pretty cool, I would say, that the data side of me, pretty cool gap analysis. We asked all of you, what's important in your career? What are the aspects of your career that you feel are really important to you? And so one thing to note here, that personal thing, that personal tag that came out as being the most important among the most amount of people is not actually the personal side of your life. It's more personal fulfillment. So knowing that you went to work and that you had an impact on society, that you had a positive impact, that my job is worth doing, right? That it's time well spent. That's what the personal one means. And then you can see the largest gap actually, again, is for opportunity. A lot of us feel that this is really important in our careers. And then in terms of success, which is that gray bar, we're just not feeling successful in that way, right? Which is really unfortunate. And we want to close that gap, definitely. One other thing I want to mention about this one is flexibility. I know a lot of people talk about work from home arrangements. That's been a hot topic, right, with Yahoo and their decisions, and IBM as well, and also flexible hour policies. And while that is not a solved issue by any means, what the data shows us of this group is that a lot of people feel like it's important, and also a lot of people feel successful in that regard. It actually has a pretty small gap. And so that is a blanket statement. Of course, it depends on where you work and what's available, but flexibility seems to pale in comparison to the issues around opportunity, around personal fulfillment, and some other issues. Another way of looking at opportunity, I know something that was up on the polling that was just carried out was entrepreneurship, starting your own company, getting funding, moving forward in that way. And so we asked all of you, what is your current job title level? And we broke this down by C-suite, vice president, all of those. And so currently about 14% of the respondents were C-suite or vice president. And then we asked all of you, what is your goal job title over any time period, right? Where do you want to end up in your career? And a lot of people said C-suite, vice president, and others. But something interesting here that popped up was entrepreneur, right? In the study, entrepreneur actually wasn't even an option. There were so many people that felt strongly about it that it was a write-in, right? And you can imagine that it would be much higher if we had given it as an option, which is my bad. We definitely will this year, and let's see how high that climbs, right? And I think this speaks to opportunity because there are opportunities in your role with your manager that you ask for, that you're given, however that comes about. But there's another option there about creating your own opportunity, right? And starting your own business. And whether that's outside of where you work, whether it's within where you work by going and saying, I have an idea for a new product or service or process, whatever that might be. And that is something that a lot of you feel pretty strongly about. I wanted to bring up here as well, there's this idea of 20% policies. Google is somebody who's kind of pioneered this. And it's the idea that you set aside a certain proportion of your time to work on things that are going to better the company. And so like I said, it could be a product, a service, a process. It could be starting a mentorship program where you work. It doesn't have to be tied so strongly to revenue. But there is a clear path here with some measurable milestones that need to be in place, right, around opportunity, around entrepreneurship, and it's something that we're definitely going to be asking about in this year's study. Do you feel like you want to start your own company? Do you feel like you can get funding if you want to? I think another issue here is around risk aversion, right? Is risk aversion where it should be, or are we doubting ourselves maybe a little bit too much? And let's figure that out. Unfortunately, the pipeline problem, the opposite side of that is people leaving science, technology, engineering, and math, whether that be a role or a company that's based on that. And so we asked all of you, do you know somebody that's left? And the majority said yes, which is unfortunate. We asked what is the reason? And you can see personal reasons bubbled right to the top. But I would say that if you group together lack of support and no room for advancement, that's actually the top reason. And that, to me, reads as another lack of opportunity, right? We're not getting support. We're not getting kind of those doors opening for us. And so we want to kind of better understand that, definitely. What that boils down to is people leaving, right? And so we asked, what's your typical tenure with your employer today? And the answer was about 7 years. We asked you if you're looking for another job. And it was about half and half, actually. Half are staying where they want to be. And then the other half are either currently looking, constantly looking, going to be looking in the next 6 months, going to be looking in the next 12 months, something like that. But there is a lot of churn happening here. And so when people switch jobs, it would be great if they stayed in science, technology, engineering, and math. It was so hard won, right, that it's 1 in 5. And we asked if you had more opportunities, would you have stayed longer? And the majority said yes. And then we said, how much longer would you have stayed? And the answer was 10 years. People would have stayed in their role or been advanced into another role within that same organization for 10 years. And I would say, I know a lot of all of you are managing teams. We know from McKinsey data and some other studies that having diversity of opinion, having diversity in terms of gender and ethnicity and race and sexual orientation, many other things, that drives up revenue, right? There's a correlation there, and it does affect the bottom line. And so creating these opportunities for advancement and keeping women and other groups of other underrepresented diversity is really important, right? If we can make a path for them and lay out milestones that, you might not be ready for this opportunity today, but if you work on this skill and this skill and this skill, then we think that you might be ready. Just communicating that goes such a long way. And you could retain people for much, much longer. This is an unfortunate statistic, but I think it's worth mentioning. Again, it's the opposite side of that pipeline issue, where we asked, why did you leave your last role? And this actually splits out pretty strongly by age. And so for women that responded that are under 50 years of age, the top reason is basically greener pastures, right? We're leaving to look for opportunities elsewhere. For women that were over 50 years of age, it was being let go. And so that could be restructuring, it could be the company closed, it could be the company was sold, it could be just being let go. But I would say that, a lot of us have been in the horrible position of having to volunteer names, right, during a layoff. I would say that there are a lot of issues to consider there, like performance, I would say is probably the top one, but many, many other issues. One thing that I would encourage you to look at is diversity. It's so hard won. We know that it's tied to the bottom line. We know that it's tied to revenue. And so just one other piece of the puzzle to consider is that, right? And look at it by age, look at it by gender and ethnicity and race and many, many other things. We look at it in hiring potentially. It's something to consider on the other side. Okay, so this is an unfortunate one. Still underreported, right? We hear about these cases all the time. A lot of these are from 2017. These are really recent cases that have come up. Some of them are around pay, some of them are around harassment. And so definitely a negative note, but what can we do about this, right? And so I think that, there we go, whoops, go back one. What we know is early engagement matters, right? Reach out to young girls, young women, get them thinking about this at an early age. Get them thinking about aptitude and interest. Do fun activities, right? Like that egg drop, or I know we all know some other ones that we did at science camp or programming camp, whatever it might be. Let's talk about opportunity. We're gonna have more information to share about this hopefully next year, and from hearing from all of you. It doesn't have to be an opportunity tomorrow. It could be getting ready for a future opportunity, right? So I don't think that you're quite ready for that presentation. I think that if you work on your PowerPoint skills a little bit more and work on speech coaching or whatever that might be, just coaching people through that is really important. Even if it's a perceived room for advancement, that goes a long way to retaining people, right? You need to move beyond flexibility a little bit here, I think. Entrepreneurship. Opportunity is not just within your organization. Thinking outside of that and creating your own opportunities. I think the Witty Conference is a great place to talk about that and throw around some ideas, right? I have this idea to start this organization or this company. What do you all think of it? Ask for some feedback. And lastly, I think we're doing the right thing by being here today. It is hard to step away from your day-to-day, right, and set aside the time and come here, but I think it's worthwhile, not only for education, for things like this, but I would say even more so for what happens in the hallways, right? Networking, getting to know each other, building that community that it feels like we're all lacking, right? This is really important. I wanted to mention, I said this throughout, but diversity is not just one thing, and all forms help with the bottom line, right? Identity is a layered thing. We need to recognize that, I think. As was mentioned, we're doing another study. We want to hear your feedback. Some of this is going to be for looking at longitudinal data. Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? What's happening in that regard, and kind of have that gut check, but also just to better understand things like opportunity and entrepreneurship and how we can help. So that's the link to the survey. It is open. Please participate. We would love to hear from you. And one other thing I wanted to mention, a little off topic. This is the 451 Alliance. This is something that I'm involved with at my job. It's a knowledge sharing group. It's focused on technology professionals. You don't have to be a technology professional to join. If you want to know more about things like cloud computing or big data, this is something worth considering. It is absolutely free to join and be a member for the life of your membership. It's just a knowledge sharing group. And we share content with you about what we've learned recently about things like cloud computing and big data. And so if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to join us, or if you want to know more about it, ask me. It's just a neat way of, we learned that reading books and articles is something that's helpful in our careers, and so this is one way to do that, right? And with that, I wanted to ask if there are any questions. It's a lot of data to throw at you on a Monday morning, but I would love to hear and keep it interactive. So any questions at all about what the data shows us, what we're exploring for next year? I see a hand right there.
Hi, first of all, I would like to really thank you for this data. It was wonderful to see that. And would we be able to get a copy of this?
Sure.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
And the other question which I had was, what was the subset that you took this data from?
Oh,
How
yeah, sure.
big was it? Is it representing a global thing, or is it just US-based? And how many people were there?
Yep, so this was from last year's study. We got about 1,200 respondents overall, so it's a pretty good end sample. The margin of error there is pretty small. And the group was basically Witty members, actually, and so it is global because Witty is global. And I'm happy to share, we did crosstabs by region, so if you're interested in seeing that, looking at APAC versus North America, I'm happy to share that. One thing that your question made me think is that if you want to start a mentoring program at your company, or if you're looking to start something like that, it might be useful to share this data, right? And say that we know that this is really helpful. It gives you kind of ammunition going back to work, and I'm hoping that you all can use it that way if you want to. Yeah, good. I'm happy to hear it. Any other? Oh, there's a question. I think there's a mic over there, or I can repeat your question if you want.
Terms of all the gaps that it's showing.
Nope.
Turn on the
So the data is really good, basically, I would say, foundational point regarding the gaps. And then you shared some news as well. These are the news about different, companies and so forth. Are these companies given that information back regarding this is what we see in the broad scheme of things? Or are you just collecting the information just for knowledge purposes, but is there any step taken, or are there any plans to take some steps to improve the situation?
Yep, absolutely. So with the results so far, we've done a webinar, and I presented this a few times, and members of those companies have approached me, and we've worked on different options, right? Do you want me to do the same presentation for your workforce and trying to share it with them and look at maybe their respondents in that way? One thing that we want to be really careful of here, though, is anonymity. And that's what gives people the freedom to say how they feel, right? And we actually had a bunch of open response options too, where people identified their company, and we've stripped that out. So that's kind of the balancing act there. But absolutely, certain companies have approached us and Witty and myself and said, this was really great. I want to use this as ammunition to kind of move things forward in my company. I know this is an issue. Absolutely, that has happened. I don't want to reveal which companies have approached us, but yeah, people are using this in a constructive way just within their company culture to improve things, for sure.
Hi, I have a question over here. I'm at the microphone.
There's a question.
Oh.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Sorry.
I'm actually at the microphone. We're supposed
Hi.
to. So hi, I'm Candace Benson from Boston. I have a question. It seems like as we continue to see the numbers year over year, we're not seeing huge improvements. And so part of what I am curious about is, are we asking the questions in a way that helps us also to have insight into why are we not seeing improvements? Because we continue to ask the same questions, we sort of get the same answers year over year. So how can we maybe get more insight into that?
Yeah. I think there are a couple of things that I would add. So this was the first time we've done this. And so we asked mostly Witty members. It would be great to get men's point of view and see how that differs or how that's the same. And I know that that is something that's underway for this year's study, is broadening the scope and looking at different groups of people. Another thing that I would add is we know that for young women and girls that's really important, and it would be great to hear their feedback as well. And so we've been thinking about how do we get that in there as well, because we know that it's a pipeline problem, the decision's being made at that point. And so how do we reach those people and change that point of view? The only other thing I would add is that it's evolving, right? We didn't know last year when we asked that opportunity and entrepreneurship would be big levers. We know that now. And so we're trying to better understand how to improve that. It is difficult. And I think that part of the problem is that when you're dealing with the change point being, let's say, a second grader, it takes a decade or longer for that change to be felt. And so part of it's just that it's generational and kind of demographically focused. It is a shame, absolutely, that we see the same numbers year after year, right? Well, the only thing I would say is that we know it's about 1 in 5. It probably used to be much, much lower than that, but it was a very long time ago, right? So it does need to move faster, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Hi.
Hey,
Can you hear me?
little closer.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm Garner from the Boston chapter. Hi.
Hey.
That was awesome information, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I'm just curious, a lot of times I find that it's the larger organizations that can actually support more of these STEM programs or get more involved with schools and so on because they have the resource and they have the budget.
Yep.
And I wonder if there are ways, or if you're looking into it, is how can we help startups be able to support, the women engineers or people who want to actually support STEM programs? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how to get or motivate. I mean, I think a lot of us want to help the startups for sure, but they don't often have the resource or the budget. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how we could help there.
Sure, absolutely. I think as you were speaking, a couple of things came to mind as ideas, and I think this is something that we should all discuss together. But one of them are outside third-party organizations like a Witty, right? So not relying on the company so much, but looking at, I'm sure there are startup organizations or chambers of commerce or that sort of thing that we could all get together in that way. Another one is just contributing as an individual. So I'm thinking of things like Big Sisters or things like that, where just mentoring and being involved and happening to be a woman that's in a STEM role or with a STEM company, it has a huge impact. We probably don't even realize how big of an impact it has, because for a lot of those girls, they don't get exposure to that, right? There's so few of us that they would never meet us anyway. And so those are two things that come to mind. But you're right, does tend to be a resourcing issue that large organizations do tend to be more, I would say, visible at least. And it's a challenge for a startup, right? Because you're focusing on marketing and sales and getting the product out the door, right? So I would say that I would turn more to the individual or to a third-party organization, probably. I think I have to wrap it up, unfortunately. I know I see some questions out there. I'm going to be around, so if you want to ask them, I'm so sorry. Well, let's take one more question.
So I have a teenage daughter, and I'm very fortunate that we're in a great area that has a wonderful STEM program in the schools, and they start them in elementary school.
That's awesome.
But I think this information would be awesome to present to the district to say, hey, we need to get our girls involved, and here's why.
Yeah.
Because I think the program is great, but I see the same data that you do, is
Right.
that the girls are left behind because they're not encouraged.
Right.
So how do we get this into the school districts? Because they're the ones that have the best influence over our kids besides us as parents.
Yep, absolutely. Another attendee is saying there's a nonprofit that does that, so you guys might want to connect and talk about that potentially. I think that you can do it, right? I mean, you could go back and present it to your district. I think that that's helpful, but you're probably thinking at a larger scale, right?
A broader scale, and
For
I
sure.
certainly will go back to my school district and share that. But
Right.
Is 521 doing something like that as well?
Yeah, I think one thing that was kind of discouraging for me, at least, is in pulling those statistics together for that front slide. A lot of that comes from the U.S. Labor Department, and I looked at the Department of Education, and there just actually wasn't that much there, which is pretty scary. So I would say that it's something that we should explore for sure. And all I know now is that at an individual level, that's something that we can do, but maybe that's something that we can talk about and explore further. With that, I will cede the stage. Thank you very much. Enjoy the conference.